Hawaii, and I want to welcome you back to Fast, Healthy, and Ono Cooking with Chef Dan Swift. You may have noticed that we're putting a little bit of a new twist on the program. We did a meeting with several folks who have been attending the cooking program all year and got some great ideas from them. But one of those ideas was based on the fact that COVID has not gone away as we had hoped, and we want to travel. And since we can't travel physically, we want to travel with our cooking. So what we're planning to do is offer this program until June. And each month we're going to pick a different region of the world and focus on the cuisine from that area. The other thing that the volunteer focus group thought would be neat was, instead of just telling people where to buy a spice packet or seasoning, would be to actually show folks how to make that seasoning. So we're going to give that a try tonight. And the seasoning that you're going to make is something that you'll be able to apply to all different kinds of dishes. So we're hoping that you find that interesting, but I'll probably be giving you a little poll at the end to see how you felt about the seasoning packets. Before we go any further, I do want to just do a little bit of a poll to find out who's here. So my question for you is this your first time attending? I'm guessing not, but if you are, I'd love to know. And then, which island do you live on, or are you from the mainland? So if you don't mind just taking a minute to fill out my poll, I'd really appreciate it. Oh, excellent. We do have a few new folks here tonight. Terrific. Okay. I'll give you just about 30 more seconds on that while we're waiting for folks to join us. Okay. I'm going to end that. And so if you can see it, you'll see that 6 people are new tonight. So welcome, you 6 new people. I hope you really enjoy our program. And then 67 of our participants live on, or 67 of our 96 polar participants live on Oahu. Maui has 8, Hawaii Island has 10, Kauai 2, and we have 9 folks from the mainland. So they're in a completely different time zone. So thank you folks for joining us as well. So if you want to get rid of that polling screen that I just put up, just click the X in the upper right-hand box of the poll and it will take it off of your screen. For those 6 of you who are new, I just want to let you know that AARP Hawaii is a nonprofit membership organization with a social mission. And we have 140,000 AARP members here in Hawaii, but what we do for everybody. And our intent with this cooking program is really to give people more tools for their toolbox when it comes to healthy living and healthy cooking, and also to have a little bit of fun. So we hope that you 6 will join us again, and we're so grateful that the rest of you have come back for another season of Fast, Healthy, and Ono Cooking. If you're new to Zoom, we're using the webinar, our format. So if you want to ask the chef a question, put it in the Q&A. Use the Q&A tab if you want the questions to be directed to Chef Dan. Lonnie Taylor will be fielding the questions tonight. If you have a technical question or you just want to talk to the whole group, you can put that in the chat. And then we won't be using the raise hand function at all. I am going to give away 2 door prizes tonight. You'll have to respond to me in the chat that you're present and that you want the door prize. And what I'm going to do is actually send you some pre-blended Tempero Bayano seasoning. So if you don't respond, then I'm going to assume that you're not on and you walked away. So we'll be giving 2 of those away. Again, if you're new to Zoom and you want your view to be the best view for this program, I recommend going up to the upper right-hand corner of your screen, clicking on view and picking speaker side-by-side view. And then you may notice that we have closed captioning on. You can turn that off if it annoys you. So just click the CC/live transcript button and stop the closed captioning if you don't like having that on. Without further ado, notice I put a new picture of Chef Dan Swift on the slide. All you returning folks, I think it's a pretty cool picture there, but I'd like to introduce Chef Dan Swift, who is the Workforce Development Coordinator at Windward Community College and the leader of our program. Chef Dan, you go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Jackie. Am I the leader? I thought you were. Yeah, you'll notice I needed a haircut in that picture. That was pandemic, long hair. So anyways.
I thought you were going for scruffy sexy or something.
I got scruffy right now. We're still not back to normal, but thank you for the intro, and thanks to Lonnie and Cindy, everybody on the AARP side. I don't know if Char's on tonight, but and welcome back to all of you folks that have tuned in previously, and then of course everybody that's new. So driving in today, Alice and I were talking. It's like, oh, we haven't had any holidays. We had Thanksgiving and then a show after that, but since the last one, we had Christmas, Kwanzaa, New Year's, and then Lunar New Year just this week. So happy holidays to everyone. It's nice to be back, and we are lined up to go through February with the Latin American spice blends and talking about the cuisines and some of the things that you can create at home in terms of blends and or purchase them already mixed, mixed, and different dishes that you can then incorporate those into. So it's not like this particular spice blend or any of the ones we make will be useful for only one dish. They're useful for a lot of different ones. So we'll kind of talk about that as we go. If you have questions about a particular spice, feel free to let me know. We did send out a recipe, and you should have that if you downloaded or if you wanted it. And what we did, or what I'm doing for the next 4 classes, is just putting a recipe across the top for the blend. And the plan was to go through and do the mixing of the spice blend ourselves at the beginning, and then just move forward with the recipe as we normally do. So tonight it is a Brazilian chicken dish with vegetables, some fresh garden vegetables, and we'll talk about those as we get going. But feel free to type in questions if you have them. One thing that's really good, if you've watched the show before, is the technique that we're using tonight. It's a twist on one that we've done before, and I'll highlight like the searing and the deglazing and the steaming, basically almost like a light braise in a sense. So it's great, I think, when students have an opportunity, and I guess we're all students, but have an opportunity to see something that's been taught before, but a different twist on it. And then that allows you to reinforce the lessons or the techniques that you're picking up along the way. So we'll start first with this, and I think Jackie pronounced it right, Tempero Baiano, Brazilian spice blend. And I was online today, like watching, I wanted to see some neat like videos about the blend that we used, or that we're using tonight. I looked at a couple that were done in English, but there's some really cool ones. I don't understand what they're saying because it's in Portuguese, but there's some really neat videos if you just do a search for that spice and then click videos on whatever browser you're using, and you can be transported into personal kitchens of folks that are in Brazil or wherever in Latin America making this particular spice blend, and the dishes that they tend to use it for once the blend has been made. So this will give us far more than we actually need for the particular dish tonight. So we would just need a container that's airtight to seal it. And in Hawaii, we have high humidity, so we always want to be a little bit careful with things pasting up. So we'll talk about that because this has no salt in it, and we're dealing with some of the powders. And that can absorb a lot of moisture really quickly and become very, very hard. So really quick, let me just run across what we have for this blend. And there are some variations on it if you do some searches online. The blends that are already pre-made that you can purchase online should have most of these ingredients, but I've seen some with rosemary, a couple other different variations. But overall, you should find all of these ingredients in there. So we've got onion powder, garlic powder, basil, thyme, oregano, paprika, coriander, and cumin. These are really the two that set this blend apart. Very strong cumin, if you are familiar with that, very popular in Latin America, very earthy. Coriander is a little bit lighter. It's the seed from cilantro, which we use a lot of, and pretty common to be utilized in a lot of recipes here in Hawaii and on the mainland. And then for heat, we've got black pepper and cayenne. So each of the ones in front in the larger dishes are 1 tablespoon. And then the heat elements, or the black pepper and the cayenne, is 1 teaspoon. So 1/3 of the quantity here. If you wanted it spicier, you could add a little bit more cayenne. If you wanted no spice, you could remove that. If you wanted to put in white pepper to give it the heat, if you like that flavor, you could also do that. So I would encourage you to be a little bit creative, and you'll see, I think, over the course of the next month, some of the spices like paprika are across the board in every country in Latin America, and pretty predominantly used in a lot of the blends that they make. Garlic and onions, obviously. So for home use, one of the things that I would recommend, if you're not purchasing the blend as it's called online, you can, I went to like 3-4 different supermarkets trying to find what I would call a Cajun blend, because basically if you do Louisiana style cooking or Cajun style cooking, this basically is a Cajun spice with the exception of the coriander and the cumin. So, I tried to find some that were like as absolutely close as possible, including all the other ingredients with the exception of these 2, so that a person could take a shortcut. And just read the labels if you can. Be sure and bring a magnifying glass because the fonts are like 4. I had to like take a picture, blow it up to read it. But at times I found the closest one. This was an all-purpose Greek seasoning, ironically, but it had almost all of the ingredients with the exception of the coriander and the cumin. But most of the blends will also have salt, and you'll notice salt is not in here. You could put salt in if you wanted to. And a lot of them also have sugar. So you want to just check the labels and see. So you may have all of these at home. I think Jackie said she did. So she had everything necessary to make this blend. But if you're looking for different methods to find shortcuts to not purchasing 9, 10, 12 different spices to make a blend, you could do that. And then you could also get Italian seasoning, which includes thyme, basil, oregano, sometimes marjoram, sometimes rosemary, which is often found in this blend as well. But that would eliminate purchasing those 3, allow you to buy 1, and gives you a base for it. So what we're going to do is mix this together. This was a bulk Cajun spice that was at Whole Foods, I think it was, or Down to Earth. And it was, again, very similar, not quite as close as the Greek one. But if I took this and added the coriander and cumin to it, it would give me something very close to what we're going to end up with here today. All right, and then if there's any questions, just go ahead and fire away.
Okay, Pearl wanted to know, and you mentioned it earlier, how do you keep your onion and garlic powder and from clumping in a humid climate?
Yeah, that's a great question. You can buy the little dehydration packets. We pick them up at the Container Store, which is down on Mapunapuna area. But a lot of, you can either buy them online, and we buy a pack about this big, it has 100, and I think it's $6. You may not need that many, but you can get those little packets that you find in your nori and all of the things that we don't want to dry out, and just drop one of those inside once you have it in your container. That's what I would recommend. And hey, Pearl, how's it?
And Lori and Sandra, they want to know, would I be able to use smoked paprika, or should I buy regular paprika for my spice drawer?
Yeah, you can use any kind. This is not smoked, but I like smoked, honestly. I don't know that in the final blend you'd be able to notice the difference, but that little bit of smoky flavor and toasted aspect to it, to me, is a little bit more aromatic and more flavorful. But I wouldn't worry about finding the right or exact one, or not making something because it's smoked versus not smoked. Even with the cumin seed that I have here, it is, I opened a fresh one today. I had one that had been open for about a year and one that I opened fresh. Night and day difference in terms of the flavor and the aromas. They tend to die off over time. So Jackie mentioned to me earlier, she keeps her spices in the freezer. We don't do that here because it's too inconvenient. But that's one way to preserve the oils and keep the flavors in your herbs and spices for sure. So all of the powdered ones and the leaf ones, the small leaf ones, I'm just gonna mix into this bowl. And there's a couple here that I want to grind up. All right, the powder's obviously no problem. And keep in mind, if you have ground thyme instead of leaf thyme, that's perfectly fine to use as well. I've noticed in a lot of the videos and the research that I did that some people like this to be a little bit on the coarser side. So the leaf is fine, or you could put it all in a grinder and grind it all up. So you could do the grinding a couple different ways. Here's a couple mortars and pestles that you can utilize. This is a granite one. This is a small porcelain one. And then this is a brass one. It's almost like a bell. And hear it. Quiet. This is more for like Chinese medicine and pharmaceuticals. So this thing weighs about 15 pounds. Very heavy, solid brass. Or you can just go straight for the easiest one if you have a coffee grinder. They double as spice grinders as well. But just make sure you clean it out really well before going between one or the other. So I'll just put these in here and give it a quick pulse. And this is a coarse black pepper. So that's why I'm actually grinding it up a little bit. I don't want it to be too coarse. I like it to be a little bit on the finer side. And then this I can just pulse a couple times. I noticed that a lot of the recipes and the folks that use it, as I mentioned before, like to keep the cumin and coriander a little bit coarse. So I'm just gonna stop it right there. So I still can see the chunks, and I'm gonna add that.
Now Deb is asking, some of her spices are older. Should she compensate by adding more?
I would go by taste. There's a couple things you can do. I mean, you could add a little bit more, but with these blends, if you make the blend itself, you might find if it's weaker that you need to add a little bit more of the spice blend to the product you're making. But I don't know that you would need to throw off the ratio of the actual mix that you're mixing. The other thing you can do, and I was going to show it tonight, but I don't know that we'd have time, is you can always toast it. So I have the burner on here to heat up the pan for the chicken that we're going to sear here in a second. Depending on the dish that I'm making, I could also put the spice blend in the bottom and toast it a little bit. So that's a really, really good trick, especially for your heartier ones, not your powders so much, but this spice blend would be good. Thrown in the pan, toasted just for like 30 seconds even. You'll get those aromas and the oils releasing, and then you throw in your oil and you move forward with the cooking. So that's a good technique to bring out more flavor as well. So that's a good question, Deb. So I have this here and I've heated up the pan. I'm going to just salt the product. I'm not going to add the salt to this, but keep in mind, if you use a nice kosher salt or a coarser ground salt in here, it will prevent it also from sticking. So if you wanted to make this seasoning spice blend with some salt in it, that would help prevent it from clumping up also. Okay. And then what we're working with tonight is our nice garden vegetables. I'll talk about those in a second, but we'll get the chicken going first. And we have on here, I removed the bone. I got thigh with bone in and skin on, but we try to eliminate as much of the fat as possible. So sadly, I'm going to just take the skin off. If you wanted to cook it and you're not worried that much about that extra fat, you could certainly leave that skin on. You could even leave the bone in. Just keep in mind, it takes a little bit longer to cook. So we'll spread these out. I got about 5 here. I'm not sure they'll all fit in this pan, but we'll spread them out a little bit. Hit it with some seasoning. And this could go into a shaker. It would make it a lot easier if you're making this at home to then come and season your different ingredients. And you can find those at either use one of the old ones from your spice cabinet when it's empty, or there's a couple shops in town like the Container Store that sell those little shakers for making spices. So I'm just stacking them now so that I get the seasoning on both sides. There's one that was hidden in the bottom, didn't get any spice. I'm going to put some on here. And I'm being a little bit liberal here. I don't want to under season it. I want to get a nice amount of seasoning on there. And I can turn the heat up a little bit. I just had this on as low as it would go. It's probably really, really hot now. And a little bit of olive oil. And if I had a, like I said earlier, if you had skin on, it would be skin side down. And even if you remove the skin, I put the part of the thigh that had the skin down as well. And I have to make enough so Jackie has dinner tonight. So both Jackie. And I'm putting, I see.
Chef,
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
The mix from Times, and was it without cumin and coriander?
No, it was. I ground up all of the cumin and coriander and that coarse black pepper, and then I mixed it in there. Oh, the brand of the cumin?
Yes.
The one
The
here?
name.
There are like literally dozens if you're talking about the Cajun one. Everything from Paul Perdome, who's a classic Cajun chef, to Emerald Lagasse, to actually there's some Hawaiian spices that are made locally that are pretty close as well. Pele's Fire, Kailani, I think it is, that's available at Chef Zone. It was at Whole Foods and also at Down to Earth. So I was surprised, actually. Times had a better selection of spices than the two stores that I don't normally shop at, that I went to look for. So I'll just save that down here. Now you can, I've turned this up about as high as it'll go because I've loaded the pan with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different pieces of chicken. And now what I can do is take my vegetables and I'm gonna just mix them. I'm gonna set these two here. I've got some cauliflower that I cut all into small bite-sized pieces. A little bit of broccoli, some fresh green beans, a yellow pepper. I've got a little bit of stock here that I'm gonna add at the end. It's this is about 3 times or 2.5 times the recipe, so I've got a little extra there. And then I picked up potatoes. On the recipe, I put down a new potato, and if you get the larger red ones or the white ones, you can cut them into smaller pieces. But we had these donated. These are these beautiful little, well, actually it's called the Little Potato Company. And you can get these. These are designed to be like microwave in this particular container. Really small, they cook really quickly. So that's a great option for this. I don't even have to cut them. I think those are available at Times as well. Okay. And then I like to hit this with just a little bit of oil so that the seasoning will stick to it because we're going to toss that. I also have Brussels sprouts and shallots, but I just wanted to show how I was cutting them because it's important when you're using different sized vegetables. You want to make sure that they're all going to cook the same amount of time. So if you've eaten Brussels sprouts or you cook these at home, a lot of times they're boiled first, perfectly fine, or blanched. But I'm not doing that in this case, so I'm going to need to cut this into 1/4 pieces so that it cooks the same as the potato or the other vegetables. So that's one of the tricks really, is to make sure that all of the items that you're cooking are done to perfection at the same time. So that'll just go in there. The shallot is just like a red onion. It's in the onion family. I'm just doing julienne strips. And that will go in here. And now we'll hit it with some of the spices. And I'm going to be a little bit generous because it's nice, flavorful, spicy food, not hot necessarily. What you can also do, and I didn't do it myself, but I probably could have or should have, is tasted my blend so that when I make it, maybe it's got a little bit more of this or a little bit less of that. I can come back and adjust it before I put it in the container to save it. And here I'm going to hit it with a little bit of salt. Because remember, I didn't have any salt in that blend at all. Little salt on the chicken, a little bit on the veg. That's ready. Now that won't all fit in here, I don't think. I'll do 2 batches. I'll do another batch after the show. But you can see that the chicken, these are nice thick thighs. And if I turn it over, you can see it started to caramelize nice. The seasoning of the aroma is beautiful. So what I can do here, I'm going to move these to the side. And I'm going to drop in some vegetables. And do be careful because, you know, you've got liquid dripping from the chicken. It's in the fat and you don't want it to burn you. So just be careful. We'll add a little bit. About half. I'll get almost all of that in. Pretty close. And now I can spread the chicken back out over the top of the vegetables. Still on high heat here for this burner. And I want to let that cook. Continue to cook as well. Were there any questions?
I have one more. Barbara wanted to know, the oregano and the paprika, was that 1 tablespoon or 1 teaspoon?
1 tablespoon. The only one that was a teaspoon were the 2 ingredients that added heat. One was the cayenne, the other was the black pepper. So you may, if you have a love for spice, like I said, you could add a little bit more black pepper, add white pepper, you could add cayenne. Obviously, you're not going to be able to add anything wet like sriracha. If you're really addicted to the flavor of your favorite hot sauce like Tabasco, you wouldn't add it to the spice blend, but you certainly could add it to the finished dish as you get going. So keep in mind that there's variations there, but the only one, it was 3 to 1. All of the top herbs on that recipe or that were in the large vessels, and the only 2 that were 1/3 or 1 table or 1/3 of the quantity as the others was the black pepper and the cayenne, and those were 1 teaspoon each as opposed to 1 tablespoon. Okay, so I covered this up. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Bev wants to know, chicken breast, can you use that instead of the chicken thighs?
Absolutely. That's one thing we kind of wanted to highlight this month. You could do this, well, this spice blend, Tempero Baiano, could be utilized with fish, shrimp, chicken, beef, anything really. Pork would be great. If you were staying away from chicken thigh, then you absolutely could use chicken breast. The thing you just have to be careful with anytime you're working with chicken breast or cooking it is that it gets dry really quickly. So once you go over the internal temperature of 165 and the moisture starts to leave the breast really quick, because it's very lean, there's not a lot of fat. So it's very similar to like a pork chop. Not a lot of fat inside the muscle tissue itself. So once it goes beyond about 160, 165, that moisture is lost and you can't really get it back. So the reason we use thigh a lot is because it has that little bit of intermuscular fat, and it's literally impossible to overcook it and make it dry. It can be done, but it's pretty difficult to do. So great question though. So,
Well, you know, Shirley wants to know if you can use duck.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Duck would be great with this. Now duck usually is cooked medium rare. So you'd season it and then sear it. Skin side down. I'm guessing you've cooked duck before, but duck breast, or excuse me, duck skin, if you're leaving that on, is extremely thick and extremely fatty because they're migratory. So they store up a lot of fat in the skin. And usually it's skin side down on low to medium heat for about 7 minutes to 10 minutes to reduce the fat out of that skin and make it crispy. So I know my wife loves duck. We haven't had it in a long time. I think it's on the list for our anniversary meal, but or maybe we'll do it next month too. So I killed 2 birds with 1 stone. It's our anniversary. She just went, oh, she's sad. So we'll do a show and that'll be our anniversary dinner. But you can do it with duck, any fish really. This would be a great rub on ahi and then seared like blackened tuna. And then I'm going to take this off. I covered it because it's hard for me to hear when it's all sizzling and popping. But normally I would have, well, I can cover it now, or I could have left it open either way. But we have to be careful here that the camera doesn't get all steamy and make sure that I can actually hear. So I'm going to remove the lid really quick and add a little bit of stock.
Kathy wants to know, can you use fresh cilantro instead of coriander?
I love that question. Who did you say asked that question?
Kathy?
Kathy, great question. I was thinking that today. You'll see, I think next week is chimichurri, which is like a Argentinian pesto, basically, with oil and herbs in it. And as I was making this or prepping the ingredients today, I'm like, oh, coriander, I could just use fresh cilantro, absolutely. You could do it in the finished dish or as you're cooking the dish. Of course, you couldn't put it in the spice blend because it's wet. It could mold and would cause problems. But this with some fresh cilantro, or I've got some green onions tonight that we're going to cut up and use as a garnish. Very, very simple. But cilantro would be great. So I love that you're thinking outside the box in terms of other things that you can utilize to create just a little twist on what you're doing. Even swapping out one spice for another, you can create your own blend. Don't feel restricted by the fact that you might not have one in your cabinet, or you can't find one at the store, or you don't have coriander, but you have cilantro. That's fine. Just make the blend, cook the dish, and use the cilantro at the end. The flavors are similar, not exactly the same, but similar. So that's, yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Okay. I'm just going to move this to the side. I'm going to cut my garnish. I just took a couple green onions from home. We also had, I had fresh thyme. I had rosemary's not in this one. I think thyme's the only one that we're growing that was in here. But you could also come back and throw the fresh herbs in there as well. This is just a spice blend, right? Herbs and spice blend, really. And if you have some fresh ones at home and you don't have dry thyme, you only have fresh thyme, feel free to throw that in. That would make the same flavor profile. Okay, and now we've got just the green onions. I like to always put something fresh on at the end, and we've done a lot of fresh herbs. And so I'm just going to cut them on a bias. Not too big, maybe about 1/4 of an inch.
Carla has a question. Can you explain the difference between black and white pepper?
It's a different plant, same, I don't know, genus or species. But there's multiple different peppercorns. White and black are the predominant ones, but you're seeing today pink peppercorns are pretty mainstream. As a matter of fact, that peppercorn or the black pepper that I had there was a blend of white and black and pink in there because we had some that was in the kitchen. So different strengths, I would say, in terms of the pepperiness. Like white pepper, I find to be really strong. Some people love it. Other people find it to be a little overpowering. It definitely makes you sneeze, I think. But all of those different peppers are from a different variety, and it depends on the flavor that you like. Green peppercorns are popular, and more often than not, those are fresh. Some of you may have tried them. It's very popular with steaks, European style cooked steaks. So you'll find green peppercorns that are soft, like Steaks Diane and a couple classic dishes. And they usually come in a jar or a can, and they're soft, but they're delicious. They're not super peppery like black pepper or white pepper, but they've got that pepper flavor. So yeah, just a different variety. It's like thyme, and Jackie Malley may be watching tonight, but I know, for example, she's growing, what was it, mint. I think she has like 7, 8, 9 different kinds of mint, bubblegum mint, or just so many amazing things that you can have at your disposal today that might not have been available in the past. Okay, I'm just going to remove this lid. I don't want it to fall. And you can see the main thing that I want to check here is the doneness. The chicken, I'm certain, is done. But the the doneness of the potato and the doneness of the Brussels sprouts, because those are the items that would take the longest to become tender. And what I do is just take a paring knife or a French knife, a little poke, and it'll tell you, by the resistance. You've all made mashed potatoes probably, whether or not they're done or not. And those are. So what I can do is remove the chicken. And remember, you'll also get some carryover cooking. So what that means is that as I say this chicken was just slightly under in the thicker parts of the chicken, when you take it off and it's sitting on this platter, it's going to continue to cook. So we call that carryover cooking. You usually get about 5 degrees in your product, especially those that are roasted. This is a different technique of cooking, but it still would be about the same. So I can put my chicken off to the side, nice and hot and steaming. And then what I did here, we've done this a lot. I could use this as a nice thin sauce if I wanted to. It's actually not too bad. I do want to taste it though really quick. Ooh, perfect. But I want to tighten it up a little bit. It's straight, a little bit thicker than water, obviously, because it's got spices and other things in it. But I'm going to just make a touch of cornstarch slurry. This can be done with flour or anything else that's a dry starch. A little bit of water or stock would work. And then I just have to stir in a couple drops and it will tighten that liquid up. So I get, more of a gravy of sorts. And then hopefully you can see that. Move that over a little bit. I can even turn it down a touch. I don't want to lose all of that liquid. And then just a couple drops. And it's always best to add a little bit and then let it cook. Remember, this has to come to a boil and then we'll know it's fully cooked. Take the gas one out. Turned it down a little too low. And then I'll have a little bit more of a glaze. I don't want it too thick because we've got potatoes here. So as you eat these potatoes and kind of mash them up, then you'll have a little bit of liquid to go with it. If you did thicken it too much, you could just come back, add a little bit of stock or add a little bit of water and then just go back and forth. And then that's ready to dish up. Oh, it smells great. Actually, I think I could probably just pour this right in the center. I got a platter that's large enough. Give it a shot, see how hot the handle is. Always be careful. Remember, on the back side, your pot or your handles can get hot from the flame coming up. So you do want to be careful. And then I'm just going to pour this all right in the center.
Zenaida has a question. White pepper is not as available in groceries as black pepper. Would you know why?
Isn't that blend that you get in the little jar? White pepper. Yeah, I don't know that you see it as much in like your traditional like McCormick spice blend section, but you can find it in like the Japanese section or the Chinese food section. It's in little jars like that. They're not always in English, so it's hard to read. So you might need to ask someone, but I don't think it's as commonly used in the regular household as black pepper, but it is the most popular spice in the world. Pepper, that is, ground pepper. Western Asia. Do you know the brand name of that one? I can't read the label, but it's a little shaker about this tall, just a cylindrical one with one puka hole in the top. And it's used in a lot of Chinese and Asian style cooking. They also make one with cayenne as well. Okay, so we've got, you can see still a nice amount of sauce, and this could have been poured off into a gravy boat or a side dish that was then put on the table and passed around, or it can be served on the platter like it is here. But you are going to want to put some of that on the on the potatoes, especially as you cut them or smash them with your fork, you want to have a little bit of sauce for that to absorb. And that should be about it. Smells great. You can always come back and hit it with a little bit more, just in case. But the aromas coming off of that smell great. And as I said earlier, this completely reminds me of Cajun style cooking, which was popular even in Idaho where I grew up. And we would always like blacken our fish or use it for different dishes. And the aromas are very similar because most of the ingredients are the same. Like I said, the difference is in this one, we're putting the cumin and the coriander. So a little bit different in that regard. Awesome.
It will be interesting to see if the proportions for the Brazilian are the same proportions as the Cajun cooking. Like, does it have does it have the same flavor profile, or is there lots more of one thing than another? I'm very curious about that.
Most of the recipes that I have used or that I would put together, it was equal parts with the exception of the hot stuff. So it was very similar in portions. What we would normally use though was not like leaf thyme. We would use ground thyme. So all of it was ground basil, ground thyme, ground oregano, not leaves. Whereas this, you can see there's some texture to it because you're using leaf basil, or at least I did. You don't have to. Leaf thyme, leaf oregano. So the portions though were very similar. And then next week when chimichurri is a little bit different, but the other spices throughout the rest of the month, you'll start to see a pattern form. And I'm glad they came up with this idea. Thank you to those that spent the time, because it's almost history and educational in that regard, because it shows you the progression of spices and how the spice trade dominated. There was a lot of things going on. So hopefully you enjoyed it. I hope you try it. Very, very simple, but this could be fish, this could be pork, this could be shrimp. Just make sure that you're cutting your vegetables the size that they cook perfectly when the protein is done. Or even tofu.
Terrific, thank you. And when I was researching it, I even read you can just sprinkle it on roasted vegetables, put it on a pan and roast the vegetables with it. So I'm very excited to try the flavor blend. I've got a poll up for people to see if you two enjoyed learning how to make a spice, because we're thinking about starting each month for each region off with focusing on the spice blend. So please take that poll. I also want to mention June Ibarra and D. Ho. You're the winners tonight. So you can email me at jboland@aarp.org with your mailing address, and I'll send you some of these seasonings. So thank you very much. And thanks to Chef Dan for being willing to try something new and exciting. I'm really interested for next week because I love that sauce. I could eat that sauce plain, but it's so good on meat. So I hope you folks join for the lamb. And is it chimichurri or chimichurri, Dan?
I say churri, so it's probably the other one.
I say it too. I guess we'll look up the pronunciation
before
we make it.
Always correct me. So, I can't believe I got it kind of right tonight, but that's okay. I've accepted that.
And so then the last thing I do want to mention is I'm going to send a follow-up email to all of you, which has a slight survey. It's really just about the March menu. We're looking at the Mediterranean, but we're thinking about non-traditional Mediterranean countries and some vegetarian options, and I'd really like to get your input on it. So if you want to give input on that, I'll give you about 5 days to respond, and then we'll be planning that next month. So if you'd like to give input, please do respond on that survey. Any last words, Dan?
No, just thank you. And it's been a long time. It's almost been like a couple months, it seems like. So it's good to be back. And I just want to thank everyone for tuning in. And then later, Jackie, you can mention about the thing in March, one of the later shows probably.
Oh, yeah. So for those of you who are still on, Dan, this program is going to be part of a national virtual community center event that AARP is putting on. And so if you're available, it's actually going to be at 10:30 a.m. and he's going to do a one-pot salmon dish. So we'll send you more information about that, but he'll be offering this program to people across the country. So thank you so much, Dan. Thank you,
Thanks,
Lonnie
everyone.
and Alice, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Aloha.
Thanks, everybody.
That's delicious.